Hey there, do you ever struggle with boundaries in your home, work, and everything else? So, I am so excited to be joining with Cassie Owens, licensed professional counselor out of Georgia today at happywithbaby.com here. And we're going to give you 5 tips on how to have healthier boundaries. So, Cassie will be joining us here hopefully any minute now. And I know she has some really great ideas. We've had several discussions before, and if you haven't seen her, I actually did one of my expert mama interviews with her last year, which I'll put a link below here. She has such great information. She does a lot of work with new moms, and she even runs a consultation with Elizabeth O'Brien who's also an LPC there in Georgia, and they run the Georgia chapter PSI, Postpartum Support International. So she does a lot of stuff for new moms. So I can't wait till she could join us, because I know she has some great tips ready to go for you guys. So let's see. Anyway, so while we wait for her, I'll just kind of share a little bit. I know one of the things I've recently been struggling with is having healthy boundaries when I know I have only so much time to do stuff, yet also trying to balance out the needs and desires of my children. Like, for instance, they're currently in a class, and the time has changed. So now between their 2 classes, we have like a 40-minute window. And so now I'm trying to decide, do I move them to a totally different day so we don't have that big window at the risk of them not being able to hang out and spend time with their friends? Or do I stay there and try to find other things to do and wait and kind of like make that a super long day? So trying to figure out like what's the best way to go where I'm not like taxing myself, yet also being able to meet the needs of my children at the same time. So that's one of the issues with boundaries. Ah, there she is. Okay, I'm adding her right now. There it says it's adding. I can't wait. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I know we are a little delayed in the time we originally thought we would be getting online here. Hey, Cassie.
I made it. Oh my goodness.
Worked.
Okay. I need to figure out where to put my phone. I'm so sorry about all that. Oh my goodness.
No, that's totally.
It's been, yeah.
And we were planned so well ahead of time too.
I know we did. So I just need to make this a little higher, but I'm so sorry. So I took, in talking about boundaries and things, taking Facebook off of my phone. So I had to reinstall it. Then I forgot my password. So I don't know if that's better or not. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
No, I love it.
I'm here.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you made it. I know I've actually recently I was just talking to another friend of mine who took Facebook off her phone too.
Yeah.
And how she says how much better like she's feeling about that. So I'm like thinking I need to do that too, but I guess I better be aware of that if I decide to do any Facebook Lives. Right?
I was like, why is this working? But I'm here now. So.
You're here now. Great. So I was just kind of talking a little bit. So you're going to go over like 5 tips about healthy boundaries.
Yes.
So anything else you want to share? I gave a little scoop about you too before you joined us. But
well, I am a therapist here in Atlanta, and I specialize in maternal mental health. So the women and clients that I see in families are usually from preconception through postpartum. And I really enjoy the work. And I really find that, as a mother and a entrepreneur and, doing all the things and wearing all the hats that we wear, not only for my clients is like having healthy boundaries, it comes up, but in my own life, like you were sharing. So So what I kind of thought it would be fun to talk about, like, and is this angle okay? Because,
I
or
think
should I
so.
make, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, it feels weird to me because I had to switch. I had it, like, I've been spending time making my computer right. And now I'm like, okay. But so
Yeah.
the first tip I feel like and I'm just glancing at my notes in, creating and preserving healthy boundaries is to really understand like what boundaries are, because people can say that word, but like, what does it actually mean? And I think that's important to understand. So, when I think it's like a conceptual, like limit where you end and where something else begins. And I think, knowing it's like knowing what's yours and knowing what's not yours.
Right.
And knowing what's your responsibility versus what other people's responsibility is. And I think, like in my notes, I have knowing what's yours and what's not, and really acknowledging that every adult is responsible for themselves. Like, we are responsible for us. No one else can be responsible for us except for us.
Right.
And having like a functional or working boundary is one that we're taking responsibility for our own actions and emotions, and we can't expect anyone else to do that for us. We really have to be our own advocate, and sometimes that can be hard.
Right. Like, what do we need?
Exactly.
And asking for it. Yeah.
And asking for it. Yeah. So, and I have this note, according to the personal space theory in 1993, we have boundaries and can regulate how permeable they are, meaning what we let in and what we let out when it comes to physical, mental, and spiritual environment. And I think that's really true. Just like thinking about how if we have really you want to kind of have a balance, right? Because if you have really rigid boundaries and your wall is always up, then you could run the risk of like being isolated and that kind of thing. But if you don't have any boundaries and your guard's always down, then people are going to walk on you and take advantage of you. And, you just become enmeshed with everything else rather than really having a sense of self and like who you are.
Right.
So, let me see where I was going to go from that. Oh yeah. Maintaining boundaries is about being like the gatekeeper of keeping your life in order. Like, if you want order in your life, you have to take control over that. And by taking control, it's like setting these boundaries in order to do so.
So what would you say to a mom or a parent that's struggling with doing that?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. Like, that for sure is tough. And I think acknowledging that it's hard at times to create boundaries or modify them. And I'm going to talk about that in doing that. It's hard. But I think it depends on the situation and what that takes. Apparently, we're having issues today. It's okay.
We're totally having technical issues. Sorry about that. I was just thinking, I think this feels like it's not going to work out for some reason. And there it goes. Okay. All right.
So I'm going to answer that, but I'm not going to answer it right now.
Okay. Good.
So
good to have boundaries.
Yes. So, another way to think about boundaries is it's like telling other people what you want or what you expect. Right? It's like setting expectations. And, I think that's really important. Let's see. Setting limits about who can come into your space and what is expected of others once they are there. And boundaries really help, determine your sense of self and your identity. So I think it's really important to really know who you are and what you want in order to create these boundaries. And that kind of leads me into my second tip of creating and preserving boundaries is really understanding your priorities. That kind of goes with your sense of self. And I think that is really important, because a lot of times you don't realize, like, all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I'm like a chicken running around like a chicken with the head cut off.
Yeah.
And like, my plate is totally full and I can't do anything else. And I'm just feeling really overwhelmed and frustrated and angry, and you don't know why. But when you take a step back, it's like maybe your priorities things are out of whack.
Yeah.
So really, when we look to create boundaries, we need to be really clear at what's important to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is important to us?
Right. So how, and maybe you'll say this and talk about this in the next
How do you
one.
do that?
Yeah. How do you do that? Because I feel like, what are the questions you have to ask?
Yeah.
And I think it's to remember too, like, I feel like, especially as parents, like it's constantly changing, right? Like as our kids get older and their needs are different and whatever we're doing too, like it's constantly changing. And so like needing to reevaluate that on a regular basis.
Yeah. And that's like the last tip, is that it is changing. But I think when you want to look at your priorities, it's like even making a list of what's important to you. Like, okay, is it, and I will share, as we go through this, like I will share some personal stuff. Like, and when I think of my priorities, right? Like I think of my self-care of me as number one. And some people might be like, well, that's really selfish. But as we know, self-care is important. And if I'm not taking care of myself, I am no good to anyone. I am no good to my husband. I am no good to my children. I am no good to my clients. And, to other people.
I love that you said that. Yeah. Because I think we usually put ourselves towards the bottom. We don't take care of ourselves.
No, it has to be number one. We are number one. And that's okay. And I'm okay saying that. And I think that's a good, providing a good role model for my children. Like, it's important to take care of yourself. And that can look like a lot of different things, where it could be, fitness and exercise and health, but it could also mean like taking time for yourself, reading, whatever is important to you, time with friends. So like if you list out like, okay, my taking care of myself is number one, and then spending time with family is number two, and, work stuff is number three, and then like volunteer commitments might be number four. It's like, that's how I think of like, okay, getting your priorities straight. Like what's really, really important.
Right.
Because then I think from there, let's see. Yeah. Once we know that, right, then we can move into number three, which would be like evaluating your current lifestyle. Like see if like your, what you just listed, does your lifestyle reflect your priorities?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, am I putting all of my energy and time into something else that's not one of these top things? So, and I think that's a good way to assess, like, okay, do my boundaries need to be modified? Like, is there something that's like out of balance? And I feel like as you said, we are always striving for balance, right? Like in our lives, and things are always changing. But if you, like when you look at these priorities, you're like, and you're trying to evaluate your current lifestyle, it's like, does this lifestyle reflect what I want? And am I giving the time and attention to what is important to me? Am I doing that? Or, are you drowning in other areas that don't really matter that much to you?
Right.
That cause like anger and resentment and feeling overwhelmed and frustrated. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important, like when we start to feel those feelings come up, it's like really like what's happening. Like I always like if I have strong emotions about something like that, like anger or frustration, then I'm like, okay, where I need to reevaluate something, because I'm not. If I'm this upset about something that probably is maybe not typically a big deal, then somewhere I'm maybe not meeting my needs, or I'm frustrated that I haven't adequately prioritized what I want to do. So
and I think those all fall in, and what did I put here? Well, it can be difficult to assess your current situation. It may be clear that you're spread too thin, but the hard thing is sometimes you want to be doing all these things, right? You're like, I really want to be doing everything, but like I'm spread too thin. And, if this is not compatible with my priorities, then like I need to make a change. And that can be really, really hard. And that can be really hard.
Well, and I think it's like, we don't have to do everything right now too.
Right.
Right. Like, especially, our kids, like I'm in the season, if you want to call it, of like my kids are in school. Right. So there's a lot of volunteer stuff and I want to be there. I want to be at their school and do those things. But then I also run a business and I also run a home, and we're like, this last month has been crazy because apparently I decided to pile on in all three of those areas. And I'm like, it's been totally crazy making, and I was finding myself like, I feeling like scattered and not really doing well in like any of those areas. Getting like frustrated and angry and irritable. And like, I know my husband doesn't really appreciate that. He's like, so what are you doing next year? Like, is there anything you're going to take off your list? Because this is a lot. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, and sometimes when you're kind of like looking at your lifestyle, like having a partner be able to say that to you then helps you put it in perspective too. Like, he's like, I noticed that you're a little like cray cray right now. This is too much. So what are you going to change about next year? Right. And I think that is a good takeaway. And like, so, as my example, when I was kind of like, in the last couple of weeks, really being like, okay, what's important to me? Like, how am I spending my time? I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Like, I was like, I got to make some changes. And one of the things, like, I talked about is getting off Facebook, like on my phone, because I feel like it was too much of a distraction. Yeah. And so like moving into like modifying current boundaries. Okay. So I have a lot to say in this kind of tip, but
let's hear it. I want to hear how do you modify that? Yeah.
Right. So, well, it can be hard because we got to put ourselves first. So I think that's the biggest step, is being like, okay, I'm worth it. I'm valuable. I need to put myself first and make these changes because I'm responsible for me and I can make things different. Right. In that though, of course, there's certain things you might not have control over. Like, we, as owning our business, have a little bit more flexibility than someone who is, working 9 to 5. Like, if you're working 9 to 5, like that has to stay. Like, that's not going to change, right? Like, you have those commitments. But, it's important to take charge of your decisions and be assertive about it. So, like, that's a whole piece too, is learning how to be assertive. And what does that mean? And being assertive means like saying what you want and need very directly, but with respect. Like, you're not being rude about it. And one of the biggest things in modifying boundaries is being able to say no. Yeah. And that's really, really hard. Yeah. And like, I was learning when I was evaluating myself, I was like, okay, so for example, in the beginning of the year, no one wanted to be my son's room parent. Like, no one volunteered. So someone who's on the PTO reached out and said, hey, would you do this? And I was like, okay, sure. And she got someone else to do it. Meanwhile, I've been a crappy room parent and I haven't done anything, and the other person's done everything, and I feel terrible about that. But it was just something that I took on, and I should not have. I should have said, thank you so much for thinking of me. I have a lot going on, not this year. And that's how I will answer it next year. Actually, I already told the PTO person, I was like, I'm not doing it next year. I was like, I feel bad. I ended up getting the other room parent a gift card for doing all the work. Felt so bad. But like, I'm not perfect either. And like, as we continue to go along, each season and each year, like, you learn. And so I was like, I just have to say no. And saying no is hard. And I think if you practice certain phrases, that can be really helpful. Like, so, because people ask you things on the spot, like, oh, well, you volunteer to do this. And you can say things like, oh, I appreciate you thinking of me, but now's not a good time. Yeah. Or like, I'm so glad you thought of me, but like, I've got a lot of other things going on. I can't commit right now. Or I can't commit, period. Yeah. And really kind of being familiar with those phrases so you don't feel like caught off guard, and you can just answer. Or, like, thank you, I would love to, but I can't, and just leaving it at that. So I think turning down opportunities as they come when you're like, my plate's already full, that's good. I think setting limits and expectations, like, you and I do this and some other people who can, as far as like, if I'm like, okay, I'm not spending enough time with my kids because I'm on my phone. What am I doing on my phone? Okay, I'm checking my email. I'm checking my voicemail. So creating that auto response when people email me, it says like, this is when I check email. So that sets the expectation. I'm not going to email you if you email me at 5:00 at night, but I check my email between 8 and 3. Okay. So then they know this is when she's going to respond to me. I have that information. And then I don't feel like I have to be on my phone. It gives me the freedom to not do that. And even doing that with voicemails too, if you can. Like I said, in corporate America, not everyone is able to do that. But that's just an example of, for me, how that would work.
Well, and I've talked to, because I have clients that have those corporate jobs too, where they're like, oh, the expectation is I'm kind of emailing at any times. But then maybe it's a point of where okay, between these 2 hours, like I'm with my family and I'm not responding. Like, we're having dinner, we're getting ready for bed, we're doing those things. And this is the limit. I will not be responding. Will I check it again later when they go to bed? Yes. But I'm not going to, but this is my limit. This is my boundary, maybe the other way too. So and I think it's like, if you set that up and people know, then they don't expect it from you. And sometimes if you've created a bad habit, it can be hard to break that. But eventually, if they like start to see and be like, yep, this is my time, this is my time with my family. I want to make that a priority. So I can't get back to you, but I will get back to you later this evening. And I think having those auto responses that puts it out there can make it helpful too. So
it can totally make it helpful. And like with me and the whole, like, cause family's up there. Right. And so like, I'm like, I want to be more like present. I don't want to be checking anything. I don't want to be on the computer. So I hold myself accountable, which is another way to kind of help modify boundaries, is figuring out what that means for you. And like, even with the phone thing, I installed an app on my phone that kind of tells me, you've been on your phone like too long, so get off.
Does it alert you? Does it say?
It does.
Oh,
it
wow.
actually alerts you like every 30 minutes that you've been on your phone. So I think what's good is like, if you install something like that, you just see what your natural use is, and then you want to decrease from there. Yeah. So for me,
what's that app called?
Moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard of that one. Yeah. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. Another way, in kind of modifying boundaries is asking for help, like whether it's your friend or your husband or a colleague or a boss or whoever. Like, if you're like, I'm struggling here and I'm not happy, maybe they have some ideas for you, because it's hard to like think of everything. And maybe they will give you that encouragement and push to be assertive and ask for what you need, if it's something like that, or to make a real change.
Yeah. Well, and I just find sometimes putting it out there and getting the other person's perspective, like, can help shift it as well.
Yes.
And either make the change easier for you to be like, no, I'm not going to do this, or yes, this is important to me, and what do I have to do to make it happen?
Yeah. And sometimes when you bounce ideas off with people and they have other ideas, and you're like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea too. Or I could try that.
Makes it much easier. Why didn't I think about that? Yeah.
Right. So I think, asking for help and, being flexible and trying to be like kind to yourself too. It's like, you want to be flexible because you don't want to say like, I'm never going to volunteer at the school again. Right.
Right.
But maybe it's like, okay, I don't want to take on a year-long commitment, but I will volunteer like at this event or that event or something like that. But, it's really about like, okay, am I happy in my life? Am I spending the time because boundaries, to me, when I think of boundaries, I think of, where are you spending your time? How am I spending my time? Am I happy with what I'm doing? What can I improve upon? And so I think like the last tip I have is continuing to assess and evaluate and modify. Be aware of the warning signs. Like, warning signs, when you start saying, when people are like, oh, hi, how are you? And you're like, I'm busy. When your answer is always, I'm busy. Or when your answer is always like, my plate's just so full. Like, certain times of year, like right now into school year, things are just crazy because you're like running from this event, awards, play, blah, blah, blah. But if that's your answer time and time again, and you're like kind of getting angry at things or you're like resentful of situations, then it's time to like think about that and see what changes you can make, you know?
Yeah.
And I think in thinking of that it takes someone to be assertive to make these changes, that sometimes getting support is really needed because not everyone is okay with that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and I find you know, one of the biggest struggles in the work that I do with moms is just being able to ask for help. And I mean, we all need it, whether it's just that emotional support, it's helping us, you know, pick our kids up because we have this other thing that we're doing, you know, whatever it is. Like, I think how to get over it so that you ask for help, because we can't do this alone. Like and we can't just do it with a partner, you know, and I know a lot of single moms too. It's like impossible to do it just by yourself or with one other person. Like you need to like, you know, get that tribe. Where do you get the other people to help you support you? Because it makes it so much easier.
It does make it easier, you know, and I think so. There are two quotes that I wanted to share that I really like. This one, actually, Kristen Mai sent to me. And it's unknown. The author is unknown, but it says, the only people who get upset when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none.
Oh,
which is good.
Yeah, that is good.
So it's like, you know, if all of a sudden you start saying no and someone's getting annoyed, well, they're annoyed because you didn't really, maybe you were giving in all the time and saying yes, yes, yes. And the other one is from Brene Brown, of course. She says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves when we risk disappointing others. Which really goes back to like thinking about, okay, it's all about the number one thing is self-care, right? Like we set these for self-care. We set these for preservation of self and, you know, making our, like, we've only got one life to live. I want to do it the way that I can within reason, you know, of course. But there is more that we have control over than we think.
So what would you suggest to someone that's struggling to create boundaries? Like, is there, or like to say no or to ask for help, is there something you would say, like how you could encourage them or?
Yeah. Well, I think if someone said, I have trouble saying no, I would ask them why. And kind of explore, like, tell me more about why. And probably it would come up like, I don't want to like upset someone else, or, you know, it's a lot of times it's about other people, right? But then getting that person to think about, okay, but how is it benefiting you? And when the cost of whatever the situation is does not, or the benefit does not outweigh the cost, then you have to look at that. Does that make sense? Like, so I would say if you're having a hard time with boundaries, like that's a good thing to recognize. Okay, so now I'm aware that I'm really having a hard time. And then I would say, well, let's evaluate, let's go through the process. Tell me what's really important to you. Where, like, if your life was like a pie, you know, like a pie chart or whatever, kind of going through where you spend your time, maybe where you spend your time versus like where you would like to be, how you would like it to look like, to kind of compare that.
Like
and
what
then
your ideal
really,
pie is.
And like kind of depicting, okay, so maybe this area I could use some work, and really working, like figuring out what that is. Is it like, okay, so I'm on the PTO next year, maybe I need to resign from that, or is it, you know, I'm part of this club or this volunteer organization, but it's just, I love, and the hard thing is that we love so many things. And that's the hard part. Is that we love so many things, but is that going to make me happier than like spending time with my family? Maybe not. Like when I think of the priorities, right? Like that's my priority. That's something that's important to me. So even though this I could really like, and I could probably do really well, and that would be really exciting, but like I can't do everything. And really accepting what I can do. And sometimes that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Accepting our limits.
Accepting our limits. Yeah. And we don't want to. Like, I want to do everything, but I have to sleep too, you know?
Right.
I mean, there's only 24 hours in a day.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think just, you know, anyone who's having a hard time with it, I would say, I'm really glad that this is something that you're recognizing, because this is something that really is worthy of taking a look at and assessing. And let's talk about what's holding you back from making a change, and helping them be assertive, and helping with some verbiage, you know, because I think people get caught off guard a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like that, rehearsing kind of a couple phrases of what you would want to say.
Yeah.
So when it comes at you, you're like, oh, I have this.
Yeah.
And so practicing it when it's not happening, so it
Yeah.
easily comes out.
Because I did not do a good job. I did say no, but someone at the pool asked me, for the first meet, would you take over the concessions, which is like a big responsibility, buying all the stuff, setting it up. And I was just like, no. I didn't say like, oh, thanks for thinking of me, which then I was like, oh, I was kind of, maybe I was rude, but I was just like, no, sorry, I can't do that. I'll be working in the afternoon, but I'm going to volunteer. I still volunteer at the meets. I just prefer a different job. So like, you know, I was thinking then afterwards, I'm like, oh, it would have been nice to say like, oh, thanks for thinking of me. You know, I'm not able to do that. But instead I just was like, no.
Well, at least you said no.
I did
have
say,
that boundary.
Yeah, I did.
Well, and I think it's like, I mean, you just made me think of something else too. And I know I'm just about out of time because I have to actually go pick up my kids. But one of the things you made me think of is being able to like, what are your strengths, and making like sticking to the things that you enjoy doing, so that you're not adding on things that you don't enjoy and that aren't where you excel. Like me running around to pick up all these things. Like I could not do that in a efficient way, where I know there's plenty of other people that's what they're good at, you know? So like finding the things that you're good at and doing those.
Yes.
And avoiding the other things too.
And focusing on that. And that's like, you know, one thing even in like, you know, there's so many different movements out there. There's so many different causes in the world. Like I could be involved with everything, but like you can't. So it's like you have to pick one and then just be passionate about that, and know that there's other people passionate about other things, and they are fulfilling those needs. Yeah. It's just too hard to do everything and live our lives, you know?
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, like I was at a conference, and they were talking about some boundaries, and someone had mentioned how if you're asked, like at your PTO, whatever it's called, to do something and you say no, it's not like all of a sudden it doesn't happen because you said no. They just find somebody else that can do it, you know? Things still will get done.
Things still will get done.
Other people that can do it. So it's not all relying on our shoulders.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, because if you ask someone, why do you want to say no? Well, I just feel bad. I feel bad. If I don't do it, who will? That's not your problem. That's not what you're responsible for. You're only responsible for the things that you take on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
very true. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good way to end it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Is there anything else like you want to say, or?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, you know, I think every so often it's nice to kind of reassess how you're doing, and there's always room for improvement, right?
Yes.
We're always striving for a better balance. And I think as like summer comes, things change, and school starts up, things change, and different activities start up. So it's just good to keep it in check and to kind of know where your warning signs are. So if you know, like, oh, every time I get really agitated, or I'm just like yelling all the time, and like I'm overwhelmed, and why am I overwhelmed? Okay, well, what can I cut out? And sometimes you can't cut something out right away. You just have to know for next year, I'm not going to do this, or next time. Because sometimes if you committed to something, you have to follow through to a point. You know, but just kind of keeping things in check, and just remembering like self-care.
Yeah. And I think
it's all back to that.
Yeah. And I think it's that kind of constant reevaluation. So I kind of mentioned on the beginning, I think before you came on, I don't know if you heard me, but like, I'm trying to like figure out this whole schedule for my kids, like activity that they're doing. And we have like this, now we have this big break. so I could move it to another day and risk that they don't have friends there. And then I know with summer, so I've just decided like, okay, we're gonna try it out and figure out what our schedule is. Like, part of me was like, no, I need to know today at this time what's gonna happen, because I kind of like knowing and then planning out for weeks in advance. But I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna kind of roll with it and see what actually feels best to all of us and what works best at our schedule now, while we're still kind of, my son has a couple more weeks of school, and then, you know, I can reevaluate when we're off for the summer and then again for next year. But
exactly.
So it doesn't have to be a constant, like, this is the moment. I'm like, I thought it was going. We're like, I'm doing great today.
I kind of saw it like moving, and I was like,
I thought so too. So I guess this is time for the call to end.
Okay. Well, good chatting with you.
Well, it was great chatting with you too. Thanks so much, Cassie. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And
okay.
All right.
Sounds
Bye.
good. Okay. Bye.